Welcome, everyone. This is the first session of the Essentials of Happiness conference, and we're going to start with a subject that maybe wouldn't resonate with the notion of happiness, obviously, and that is enhancing the well-being of vulnerable populations. My name is Mary Glazier. I'm the chair of the Sociology Anthropology Department. I'm also the director of the Center for Public Scholarship and Social Change. And much of the work that we've been doing over the past few years has to do with people who are living in poverty, people who've been incarcerated, people who have family members who've been incarcerated. And those vulnerable populations are very important to us. And assuring that they find a measure of satisfaction in life and well-being is as important as any aspect of happiness that I can think of. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you someone who's going to talk about the very important work that's being done in Allegheny County with people whose lives are maybe not often associated with happiness, people who are incarcerated, people who have family members who are incarcerated, people dealing with violence, drug addiction, alcoholism, abuse, trauma, etc. But this is not going to be a gloomy presentation, it's going to be a hopeful presentation because the speaker is going to talk about very, very important services that are being provided by resources in Allegheny County to those populations and the good work that's being done. So I'm pleased to announce Mr. John Murphy. He's a Master of Social Work and a licensed clinical social worker and a genuine humanist. I just met him for the first time last night, but I had a chance to talk with him last night and spoke to my class this morning and really conveyed a great sense of passion and compassion about the work that he's doing and for the people with whom he's been working. So he is the senior manager of acute mobile services for Family Services of Western Pennsylvania. And without any further ado, I'm going to let him take care of informing you about that work. And I'm glad that you could all be here. Thank you for coming.
Well, good afternoon. I just want to thank Millersville for inviting me out and Mary for bringing me out and giving me the opportunity to talk to your class earlier today too. If I could start for a moment just in the spirit of the essentials of happiness and talk about how I define happiness, because I think that's just it. I think happiness is something that's personally defined. I define happiness, much of my happiness, through work. I'm a father. I have 2 daughters. I'm a family man. I like art. I like music, all kinds of different things. But really, I derive a lot of happiness and a lot through the work that I do. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I've been working in community-based work for 20 years now. Worked several years in assertive community treatment in Chicago, Illinois, outreaching homeless, mentally ill adults, supporting people at having the best possible quality of life that they could have, supporting independence in the community, and staying out of hospitals. When I moved out to Pennsylvania, I moved into family-based mental health, which is also a community-based program. And in 2010, from 2010 to 2013, I was heavily involved in the Allegheny County Jail reentry effort, specifically focusing on work with incarcerated individuals and their family members. And that'll be what the presentation is on today. So thanks for having me. Good afternoon. And I'd like to start just by getting kind of a consensus in the room. How many, by show of hands, have worked with actually any family member who's incarcerated? Okay. Anyone visited a parent or just anyone visited someone in jail or prison? Okay, self-included. Anyone ever provide transportation to a family visiting an incarcerated person? Work with a parent who was previously incarcerated on the outside? Okay. And had a family member who is or was incarcerated? Okay. I think that's an important one too. You know, my family history, what's driven me in social work and what's driven me in my life doing the work that I do is coming from a recovering family. My dad started his recovery when I was 12. I've had several family members in and out of the state institutions in Ohio. And for me, I think what drives it is that for me, the reality that people work through recovery and wellness works. It's not something I learned in a book. It's something that has been a life experience for me. So it's something that keeps me fresh and renewed. And when I enter into the lives of people, my mission, I talked about it in Mary's classes this morning a little bit, is that I think what continues to drive me is staying curious about people, staying hopeful and knowing that people can make any type of quality of life change at any moment. The truth is we don't really know that. That's defined and decided by the individuals and the families that we're serving. So some words from Ed, a former inmate. What people don't understand is that when you go to jail, you take your whole family with you. So what do you guys think? Anyone have a response to that? Any thoughts?
I work career link with reentry, and we just had a sister of a brother who was in jail, and she wants to help him find housing when he gets out, but he's a sex offender. So, and her granddaughter lives with her, so he cannot stay with her if there's a kid in the house. And so she's like, he has money, but no one's going to take him in because he's a sex offender. No one wants him in their community. So it's like affecting her life because she's trying to care for her brother, but she's losing hope. She's like, I've looked everywhere. I just need your help. And I was like, I can't hand you a place to live. Like, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Anybody else? Any reaction or thoughts, feelings about that statement?
My brother's a single father, and because of drama between himself and his ex-wife, who's not allowed to see the kids at all because she's a drug addict, he had to go into jail, and it was only for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a single father and you have 2 kids, what happens to the 2 kids? And I get stuck either on the grandparents, but if the grandparents are too old and can't, take care of them, then other siblings or whoever's available. So I had to drop out of school to take care of his 2 kids, which like how it is when you get out of school for even just a semester, ends up disrupting everything at school, and it ended up bouncing around the whole family.
Thanks for sharing. Other thoughts, responses? Yes, ma'am.
I think it's interesting how when a person is incarcerated, how the family reacts is imperative on how well that individual does within the system. I've seen it where the family completely goes away from them and is just, you're in jail and that's it, we're not talking with you ever again. And I've seen the person actually decline in prison and not come up for parole or for probation, anything like that. Then I've seen the complete opposite, where the family's like, what can we do to help you get on the right track? And that person has come out of the system and has thrived. So it really hit me when it said the whole family goes with you to jail.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that's what it is. It's realizing no one's an island. Are you a social worker?
Social work student.
Social work student. So, I'm biased. I'm a social worker. So in systems, we really look at that. It's the person and environment approach. How am I influencing and affecting my environment, and how is my environment affecting and influencing me? It's symbiotic. They feed off of one another, and it's a way to assess, and it's also a way to intervene and look at how can we help incarcerated individuals, but specifically in Allegheny County, and the reentry project in the jail is also looking at how do we help caregivers and children as well, and work to affect change on the outside with those populations. So just taking a brief look at barriers to working with families with an incarcerated loved one. Some of the barriers can be related to non-incarcerated family members. As you said, people can be a helper or hindrance in someone's own recovery and wellness. There can be cutoff that happens. There's a lot of different factors there within the family system. Distance and transportation. If someone's doing state time and their family's on this side of the state, but they're placed on that side of the state, distance can be a huge factor. Hostile prison environment. That can be a big one. That's another thing we talked about this morning a little bit, is that jails can be very different, and you can have that feeling that it's not enough that someone's committed a crime and they're serving their time, but jailhouse justice exists. People go into county jail, people go into state facilities, and the type of abuse and punishment can just escalate sometimes. Communication, finances, legal timeframes, and lack of programs and services. Anything else that anyone would like to share or think is a barrier or a limitation to working with incarcerated individuals and their families?
Is it just while they're in jail, or like when they get out? Because when you get out, once you have a record, it's almost impossible to like find a job where like you can make survivable money, especially if you have a family. And so that, especially when you
Mhm.
came from jail, where like you learned a whole bunch of new stuff of how you can do what you
Sure.
do better, and you know that you can make way more money doing that, and it's more unlikely that you'll get caught because you're better at it now. It's a lot easier to go back than it is to go forward.
Good example. Anyone else? Other barriers? Start there.
Yeah, it's hard to work with the families in that, they're very guarded for, it takes a long time to build some trust with the families. They're overwhelmed by the system and, allowing somebody else who could potentially be part of that system into their home or to help them is a hurdle to get over.
Yeah. You have to find customers, and you find a customer by way of service. One of the nice parts of Allegheny having the reentry center in the jail is that that's almost one of the first forms of service that we can provide to family members and people that are serving time is if we can offer you extra visitation, if we can offer you more access to your family, immediately you have customers and immediately you have a tangible service that you're providing. And then that engagement can happen early on, which it's instrumental. I mean, positive outcomes are strongly correlated to therapeutic alliance and having that engagement. It's a great example.
I think just not having a place to land, maybe they do get paroled and where are they gonna go? A halfway house, which is just as hostile as the prison environment sometimes.
Yeah.
So they're already discouraged, having received that blue slip, and then they think, oh, I'm going to a halfway house, what's gonna go on there? And how do I get an apartment beyond that? Because if I have a felony, I can't get an apartment anywhere
Right.
with any kind of landlord. So it's just a lack of hope in that sense.
Yeah. Housing, jobs, connection. Any others? Any other examples? All right, so looking at the incarcerated family, and I really like framing it this way. Again, it's my bias, it's that systems perspective. When an individual is incarcerated, that has a lasting and immediate, effect within the immediate family and also within the community. So a couple interesting facts here is that the majority of people in jail and prison are parents. I don't know if everyone knew that. Family members are affected by the incarceration of a loved one. How can you not be? I take that back actually. It depends on what your relationship is with the incarcerated loved one. So for many people, because it's familial, it has a tremendous impact. 95% of people in prison will return home to their communities. I think that's a big piece and something that's not looked at enough. The fact is that people are typically, people aren't in jail or prison forever. So people are returning back to their community. They are returning back to their family life. What do we do to help support that? Regardless of what your role is in that person's life, whether you're a family member, whether you're a social worker or a probation officer, how do we support that? And the last bullet point here, families experience tremendous loss owing to the incarceration of a loved one. I have financial losses, emotional distance, loss of a caregiver, communication, guidance, and in a family system, particularly with parents, is the loss of a disciplinarian. Other losses that you can think about or give examples for, what do you think?
I would think that the stigma associated, the loss of reputation, when you think about in some parts of the community it may be less of an issue than in others, but for many people that have a loved one in prison, they don't talk about them, they don't address it because in some way, it takes the whole family and puts them aside, and your thought is, obviously everybody's going to think there's something wrong with us or this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, good example. Laura?
Loss of shared memories. I'm a family member doing life, and when you can't converse with your siblings over how funny it was growing up, so I think it can fit into a lot of those things, but just those shared memories when you can say, remember when we did this and we got in trouble, and it's gone.
Yeah. So in here are some photographs too of so at Allegheny County Jail, we were able to get additional visitation with a specific focus for parents and caregivers to be able to have time to be able to bond with their children. So a couple of these are slides of moms and dads, connecting with their children during that visitation. So continuing with the incarcerated family, significant impact on children. So our work has a lot to do with work we're doing in the jail and work with incarcerated individuals, but also doing a lot of work with families, doing work with caregivers, doing work with children. And one of the things we specifically look at is the impact of incarceration on children, looking at how that can affect low self-esteem, stigma, behavioral and psychological changes, poor school performance, problems with peers, so on and so forth. What do you guys think? So for those of you that have had that experience of an incarcerated family member or are working with families, would you say you see the same type of thing, or do you have a different view or assessment on that? What do you think?
For the individual that I'm working with, this is his third and last time that he will be able to be paroled. So he's a lot more motivated this go round than he was the first time. So, and he's also moved out of the offending county. So he's completely removed from everything, every sort of trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So this time is a lot different than the previous two times. So I think that also has an impact of, when you re-enter, are you going back to the offending area or are you going to a different area?
And the reason I kind of open it up is, I've given this presentation before and talking with, families that are personally affected by incarceration. It's interesting because sometimes there's children of incarcerated parents that will disagree with this. They'll say, I was fine, my mom's what I needed, or my aunt's what I needed, or my grandmother is what I needed, and I don't have this experience at all. So I like throwing it out there. I think it's an interesting thing to look at. I'm just curious what people's experiences with that. Yes, ma'am.
So I have two sisters actually who, well, one is about to go to jail for her second DUI, and then my oldest sister, she went to jail for drugs, for some drug-related charge. And I think it's interesting how in many families, when there's multiple siblings and one is incarcerated, how, in my situation, I am looked down upon by my siblings because I don't know if it's an envy or, like you say, life goes on while they're there, and then when they come out, there's this hostility towards me, because I can't do enough, or because it is difficult, you want to help them, but you don't want to enable, and it's how much help is too much help. But then at the same time, you want to be on good terms with them, but there's so much anger towards you, oh, you didn't visit me enough, or this, that.
Yeah.
It's
There's so much to that when you feel that in your family life. That's something I was talking about earlier today too. I have family members that have served time, and I still leave myself available. I love them, but my wallet's locked and shut away when they're visiting. Yes, I love you, I want to see you, but you can't stay at my place. So
that's the hardest thing
right.
too. How do you? Because I have two daughters, and my lifestyle is very different from theirs. But it's I don't want to leave you on the streets, but I just can't. How do you say I just can't?
And those are tricky waters, especially with family, because if you're a social worker or you're a probation officer or you're a counselor, your role is more clearly defined. There's laws, ethical violations if you cross over that line. But with family, it really is more complicated. There's no easy answers to a lot of it. It could be in some situations the best thing you can do is to offer respite and housing for that family member. Other times it could be that's not the best choice. That's really something that families have to figure out for themselves. And I think good work with people affected by incarceration is really helping people figure out what that is for themselves. So the second one here, and we see this a lot, is new relationships being formed during the incarceration. Very sensitive theme when you're looking at parents and co-parenting themes. I'm in jail, I have two children, and now she's moved on to another relationship, but I still want to have contact with my children. And these are heavily charged and really like deep emotional issues to be able to help support individuals and families through. Another photo of a visit. So the approach that we took in working with families is it was multi-tiered, and we continue to do work several days a week within the jail itself. The reentry center is actually built on level 1 in Allegheny County Jail. So we do individual work there, we do group work there, there's a call center, visitation, and then a lot of it is also community work. So it's continuing to engage with families, caregivers, children, and then once someone re-enters, also working with them on the community level. It's important to recognize every family is unique. So part of our assessment is really working to be culturally competent and learning that individual and that family's life story, how they define and how they understand their family to be. It's very important to be respectful of that. So we have traditional families, blended families, separation, divorce, all these various things can be themes in their family life. So we aim to serve all family members. Again, I think it's really important in this type of work if we start working with someone and it's 6 months to their minimum discharge date, and they're looking at reaching out, maybe reconnecting, reconciliation with family. When we're working with the incarcerated person and then also the family, I think it's important to realize that some people still have that track record of not committing themselves to those relationships. So it's important to be sensitive about that, to really make sure that everybody has a voice exactly in what they want. If a child is questioning whether their incarcerated mother and father is going to come out and do what they say, it's important that we recognize and honor that. Yeah, what does that mean? How do you develop trust? Do you just trust them because they're saying things are going to be different now? No, it's a trust is earned type of format. So as a counselor, I think you can help people really be secure with that and really give that some perspective. We consider individuals in the context of their family, and we definitely take a strengths-based approach, building on those existing skills and talents. So as we're doing assessments with families, we're really trying to focus on not poor decisions, previous charges, really working to be present focused and realize the skills that people have to be able to accomplish the goals that they want for themselves and for their families. So in true social work style, I guess, is, we look at the individual and what the individual needs are, but we're also looking at broader systems. What resources are out there in the community? What are the things that people need to be able to be successful and to reinvest in their family? And that's kind of part of our assessment process. Our assessment is really strong looking at family systems. We use genograms, ecomaps, ways to be able to see where this individual is, how their life connects to all these other lives within the community, within the context of their family. And again, being culturally competent, sensitive to cultural, religious differences among families. So this slide, we are partnering with so many other groups in these processes. And one of the things that we work to do is to create communities, atmospheres, and cultures of belonging. So the idea here is to not create a culture where we are families who have had family members spend time in jail and that be the identity. The idea is to be able to create a culture that creates its own identity. So what this is an example of pulling family members together, and it turned out that there were enough kids that were interested in doing a flag football league that there were a number of us that got a flag football league going for this group of people. So the identity wasn't about our moms and dads are spending time in jail and that's what connects us. What it was disadvantaged families and disadvantaged populations have a way of isolating because of stigma, because of so many different things. So what we are working to do is to pull people out, make them feel a part of their community, and to be able to support and develop programs and community things that people want for themselves based on their own interests. So engaging families, this goes back to a comment that was brought up earlier. It is interesting. It's not just with incarcerated families. I see this a lot working with families that are impacted by drug and alcohol issues and serious and persistent mental illness, is that engagement itself can be really, really challenging. We are hardwired in our primal brain to protect ourselves, to make sure that we feel safe. And for many people, that can translate into what is essentially isolation. If I isolate and I crawl into this hole and I pull away, that is my warm, safe spot. But when you mix substance abuse in with that and you mix serious and persistent mental illness in that, what happens is that the risk factors just become greater. So then the question becomes, how do you engage? How do you engage with someone that's already got you in an arm's length? How do you engage with someone that perceives you as feeling foreign? What do you guys think? How do you do that? How do you engage? How do you make connections with people that might want to keep you away?
Try to earn their respect.
Okay? What are some ways that you do that, or that you try to do that?
I would say just like a lot of the time, like I work with people in the reentry department also, and it's just about speaking to them as if they're a person and like they didn't have their charges and whatnot, like because they don't. A lot of people just kind of like don't want to talk to them and don't worry and like establish themselves with them and make like a friendship that you'll need. And most of the time, if you actually are sincere in what you're doing, they will allow you to sort of like break down that barrier and like let you get to know them.
Great example. Anyone else? How do you engage or try to make a connection with someone that might not be so keen to having a connection with you?
I think you kind of do it slowly. I've never worked with this population before, but I've worked with a lot of kids who have had mental disabilities who are very slow to open up to you because they see you as somebody who's just going to leave them in the end, so why open up now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like a slow process, showing the person that you're going to be there regardless of, what's going on in their life. And coming up to them and being like, how was your day? What's going on today? Just talking to them and being able to show them that you're going to be there, whether they want to talk back or not is like not really the biggest deal, but eventually they slowly warm up to you and see that you're still going to be there for them.
Mm-hmm. Good. Anyone else? I look at it as, really making the most of windows of opportunity and focusing on service. In some ways, I think sometimes it's a numbers game. You have all these people that are coming your way, and, this week you might have, 12 windows of opportunity to be able to make a connection with someone and provide a service that they're going to find valuable and meaningful. And I think that's what you do, and then you go with that. Other times it's going to be so much that you're going to question how you stay on top of it all. But I think it's finding those windows of opportunity, staying curious about people, and really listening to what people want. At every move, I think if you can provide a service, a straightforward thing to someone that they're going to find valuable and meaningful, you're heading in the right direction. Again, for us, a lot of the motivating factors were getting additional phone calls. That was another thing. We have a call center in reentry. So people get additional phone calls that they don't have to pay for to be able to stay connected with their families. But part of the rules within the jail is that those phone calls have to have a specific agenda. So it has to include phone time with caregivers and phone time with children. Because a lot of times if guys have a limited amount of money on their books, a lot of times it's, I need money, I need resources, I need these things. And it's a lot of pressure that families feel to be able to provide those things. So for us to just be able to offer space and say, we have this other time that we can offer to you, a 15-minute block, a 30-minute block for you to just check in and talk to your son and daughter about where they're at in school, how they're doing with homework or peers, is right out the door becomes an immediate tangible thing that you can offer someone, and immediately you start to build a connection there. offering up that additional visitation. And then from there, it really is, it's kind of an organic process. The more I think people feel that you can support them and provide tangible service to them, the more that relationship really develops. So,
I've been able to get my foot in the door with families that have a parent incarcerated, by recognizing the fact that a lot of them don't have their basic needs met right then and there. So addressing those basic needs like shelter and food and clothing, because they've lost either the income in the household or this is a new housing arrangement. But once I've helped them address those basic needs, then they're ready to start talking about whether or not they can work on a communication and connection with the parent that's incarcerated. But it's really it's so fear-based and about their sort of tenuous situation that unless those needs are met, they can't think about anything else beyond that.
yeah, it's surprising to me sometimes too that you know that there's some families, you know, it's interesting because there'd be so many stereotypes and bias about people that have that history of incarceration and or drug histories or any kind of history. But it's fascinating how many families that I've worked with that it literally goes beyond the realm of reason. How is it that this family can be taking one loss after another? Like, you know, I work with a family where the house burned down, and then the next week she miscarried her child, and the week after her brother was killed. I mean, it was like one loss after another. I mean, it really kind of goes beyond reason, you know? And then, you know, people, I'm really kind of biased. I like a lot of trauma work. You know, I see a lot of trauma in work with, in the jail population, but also just work in mental health in general. Is that the thing that we know about the brain science behind trauma is as soon as people are in that primal part of the brain, it literally is just a fight, flight, freeze kind of reflex that people are that they're living with, and you see that, so it's interesting kind of entering in there because people will start to work out plans to problem solve their life, and it's wild, and then here comes this other curveball, and here's another thing. Just when I've made all these positive steps now in the past month, and you're waiting for some type of positive return, here's another crisis. Interesting. Yeah.
You know, like whereas one thing after another, it has long-lasting effects too. It's not just about getting the people out of that type of situation, because like my life was that kind of like one thing after another thing, and like to this day, in my car, I have one or more changes of clothes, a blanket, a pillow, a blow-up mattress, something to blow it up with, extra chargers for whatever I need charging for, and a power pack. And that's just because it ends up being, like there's always those moments where you just need something, you know, like in case you lose your home or whatever. And it, like the younger you are, the more it affects you, the more it has like that kind of mentality where like you could just lose everything like a moment.
And we all want to be safe. We all want to be happy. We all want to have loving connections in life. But we're also faced with different lives, with different dilemmas. So to be in a situation like you're talking about, thanks for sharing that, by the way. I mean, that's a.
Like a lot of people, they think like if they get people just past that like hurdle, you know what I mean, of like just getting out of jail.
Yeah.
But it's not. There's like a whole snowball thing that goes down for like the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, we know that in trauma work. It's interesting. It's almost like for people that have experienced a significant amount of loss and trauma, what might be normal to us, if we have the privilege in our life of knowing what safety is and what comfort is, it's interesting because people who have experienced intense trauma, that's a terrifying place to live. Because if I feel like I'm going to get safe with anything, then that means I leave myself exposed and vulnerable. And that's something I think that can be overlooked by social workers and counselors oftentimes, is looking at the impact of that trauma. Because your own countertransference issue might be, well, why can't you just stay, you know, you're safe, everything's okay here. Would you realize what it means for me to be okay here? Like I'm crawling out of my skin to feel settled right now, because then I leave myself vulnerable. Anything can happen to me. Adjusting engagement to limitations of the institution. Jails and prisons are different. States are different. It's interesting. I've been at a lot of conferences on reentry. In some states, the only way people are getting into those institutions is through the church, basically. And then we're very fortunate, like in Pennsylvania, in Allegheny County, that we've got an actual reentry center built on level 1. And you have all the different shades in between. I think that's where it helps too, to be able to have leadership within your community, within your counties, and within your communities, because that leadership and those policies are something that you're really going to need to lean on to be able to make things happen. So just a real quick example of that in the jail is, so when Allegheny County got the money for reentry, and it was learning what we were doing, and we had a warden at the time that was all in on it, there were a lot of people that did not want to see that change happen within the county jail. So the resistance was very real, and we really, just to get things rolling, I mean, it took a couple years to get things rolling, and we really had to lean on that leadership and those policymakers to make that happen. But because of that support, it happened, and we had great results, and what started as grant-funded projects are now written into our county budget, and this good work continues to move on, which is great. So we work to engage with a family-driven mindset, and making sure that you're being attentive to families. Families and individuals will let you know what they need. Yes, sir.
Quick question: why was there resistance to that reentry center?
The resistance was a value set. So we came at an interesting time in 2010 where within a 2-year period of time there were several major indictments and several people, including a deputy warden, a major, and other jail staff that were moved out in about a 2-year period of time. So there was a very high level of corruption and a very high level of resistance that was happening there on the correction side. The warden that came in at that time literally wired the entire jail with cameras, within the first, I think it was within his first year, which really helped that cause. What ended up happening, basically, is that they offered a lot of the correctional officers early retirement to kind of move out, and sort of pretty much framed it with exactly what it was. This is a cultural change that's happening in Allegheny County Jail, and these are all symptoms and all parts of this process of this cultural change that was happening. And again, it did happen, and it has happened, and it continues to evolve, and Allegheny County Jail has a lot of pretty progressive and innovative programs that are happening there. And the outcomes and the results are tremendous, what you would expect. Oh, so one other thing here, being patient. It's part of earning your stripes, I think, in the field, is just kind of recognizing people decide their own change and their own timelines for things. It's important that we stay respectful to that. A couple more pictures of Flag Football League. So I put this in there. I just think this is an interesting thing to consider. So this is a quote from Malcolm X. There's nothing wrong with being a criminal. There's something wrong with remaining a criminal. Does anyone have any dispute with that quote, or any? What do you think? Quote can raise different things for different people. Anybody?
What if being a criminal is all you've ever known? Like what if you were brought up in a family, a traffic family, or, drugs, trafficking, and that was all you knew. So you get out and then you're still in it. You come out and that's the life you live in. So, it may look wrong to someone else, but that may not be wrong for their situation. Just playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying that's what I believe.
An interpretation, yeah. Anyone else? Oops.
I'm just always struck by a couple of bad decisions, is how one person becomes a criminal and another one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And just telling my kids they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and hearing people's stories and realizing how many people that could be them, and putting yourself in that position.
Yeah, those one or two bad choices doesn't necessarily make that who you are. It's not all inclusive. Most of us are a mix of good and bad choices. There's another back.
I would say, like, in today's society, most people do have some sort of charge on their record, so it's just about changing the mentality and not keeping that stigma with you
Mhm.
as you go throughout your life.
Good. Sir?
I was gonna say, what I get from it anyway is, being a criminal, you make a, what I get, if you're a criminal, and you make a mistake in your life, the real accomplishment is overcoming that, cause life, some people gonna make mistakes. So, the greater focus is to overcome that and then go from there. Because, that one mistake shouldn't define you. Like I say, it's about challenges and overcoming challenges. Is a real measure of a person.
Mhm. Just need to-
It just reminds me of what they tell the correctional officers as they're going through the training is everyone does things that are wrong. The difference between you and the people in here is that, they got caught for it and you didn't. Yeah, that sort of reminds me of that.
Yesterday I dealt with an older man, he's in his 50s, and he has spent 27 years in prison, and I was like, I'm sorry, like, because he's thriving to be a better person, blah, blah, and I said, well, what took you so long to want to do that? And he's like, drugs, like, don't get involved or whatever, and I was like, this man is sitting in prison, he's not a threat to the community, he's having problems with drugs, so why is this man sitting in prison, like, not getting any help? Like, the money that goes to prisons needs to go to like rehabilitation and like stuff, but like I don't understand, how are we gonna get to that point?
Yeah,
Who do we have to prove?
well,
What they need?
that definitely hits home with me. I talk about this in Mary's class earlier, there's a great documentary, I don't know if anyone's seen it, it's called The House I Live In. It's about prison industry. It's just such an unsettling documentary, I mean, it really is. And it's interesting, you know, Mercy Behavioral Health, they had the contract, and they still have the contract for Thinking for Change. It's a cognitive behavioral therapy approach to help address criminal thinking and poor decision making. But it was one of the things that they used in their groups was this documentary to help people wake up to prison industry and what's happening in America. I'm really biased because when you look at, and again, I'm not saying this is the solution, because a lot of times I bring this up, people, you know, have knee-jerk reactions to this. I think it's an interesting exploration that there's other countries that have really different approaches to how they're dealing with the drug problem and incarceration. So when you look at the countries that have real low prison jail, real low recidivism, their correctional officers are trained as counselors. When you're serving time, that time is meant to be an insightful, enlightening period in your life. The incarceration itself is considered the punishment. That's not America. You know, I mean, America is like, oh my God, you screwed up. You know, don't forget about it. You remember that time you did that, you know? It's like really putting the pressure on there. Portugal is another interesting study. So when Portugal was faced with whether they expand their jails or prisons and put more money into that, they said, we can't do this. We can't, you know, our conscience won't allow us to keep building more prisons and more jails, so what we are going to do is reinvest that money into recovery and recovery communities and wellness. And the outcomes that they have are tremendous. I don't know, you know, I don't know. They're interesting things to look at, and certainly in America, the prison industry just keeps growing. So I don't think that's the solution.
Well, I looked at statistics, and Kansas and New York are two states that they have done the same thing, I guess. They've minimized more jail time and have spent more time, and the crime rates have gone down.
Yeah.
To like work on like helping recidivism and all of that, it's like, so that should really, I don't know, just awaken our, I don't understand, like, I don't get it. But it's frustrating.
Well, see, it's a great time for you to be a part of that, though, right? It's like the whole spark is created now, and it has helped that on a federal level, more monies have been opened up. So, but to me, the thing becomes, what do you do with that money? Are you trying to approach things with innovation? My thing is, you know, what inspires people is love, happiness, connection. Those are the root things that everybody's after. You know, so how do we start to get to those things with people? In the drug game, particularly people that are in for drug charges, is that it's hard to compete with that, you know, especially, I don't want to stereotype, but, you know, if you're looking at the classic, like, younger male that makes a lot of money on the street, gives them a lot of street credibility. There's a lot of perks, and people are afraid. Some counselors are really afraid to go there with people. I've worked with a lot of people, and I won't judge their approach. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not going to walk into a group of people and say, stop selling drugs, and this is why. My thing is more like, wow, yeah, seriously, why would you give that up? That's a lot of money, And I mean, these are people too that, like, unfortunately, the cultures they grew up in, they're resigned to the fact that they may be dead. And some of them are dead by the time they're 20, 21, 22. So they're resigned to that fate. So what we have to do, I think, is to be creative about how do we offer other options. And I think we talked about this morning too, is I think education, offering space for people to reinvent themselves. So to me, especially with the younger people that are in jail, particularly for drug charges, is if you can offer up opportunities to be able to take care of the basics, housing, be able to cover basic costs for basic living, and offer education, trade school, those kinds of things as options, there's some credibility there. People can feel good about that. It's very hard to, I've literally heard, and these are peers that I love dearly, and I've worked on, but literally tell someone, you need to give up the drug game, get the job at Wendy's, live honestly. And I'm thinking, like, that's a great speech, but like, they're not going to do it. I mean, if they do, they might do it to try to stay in line with their probation for a short period of time, but rarely, I think, does that really work long term. So I think we need more innovation, more ideas about how to really help people feel that they can have a rebirth in their life.
Well, do you think the ban the box will work? Do you think that's going to help people obtain employment?
I don't know, actually. I really don't know. My thing is to be able to offer options that people can feel good about. And if pulling that aside offers more employment, I don't know. All right, so key players in jail programming are the incarcerated individual, children and families. Again, our niche was with family work, so a lot of it is, for many people, again, motivation to change is a deeper emotional thing. So for many people that we've worked with, it is, I don't want my son or daughter coming up the same way that I came up. I want to be able to offer something different than I've had in my own life. Jail and prison is a very reflective time for people. And I think it's a unique time. If you have the ability to be able to have connection with people during that period, it can really be a real intense period of transformation for some people. People really do reassess, reevaluate, and make significant change in their life, given the chance. So being realistic, too, with corrections and administration. So again, when we moved into Allegheny County Jail, I mean, the resistance was off the charts. I mean, it really was. And classic social worker, it's like I realize that the people I'm serving are not the only people I'm serving. I'm also working with the correctional officer on the unit. I'm also working with jail administration. I'm working with a lot of different people that have a lot of different ideas about how that whole process works from day to day. And it doesn't help make an enemy. So if we go through a change in a correctional officer and suddenly I have a group and these people are supposed to be down here and I'm like, where's my group? Oh, everybody slept in. Everybody, really? I mean, the entire group, there's nobody that's, and then what do you do with that? Because it can be, in the jail, it can be real subtle too. It doesn't always have to be, we don't support you and we don't want you here. It can be one excuse after another of why, someone was not called down, for their group. And figuring out what you do with that. What do you do with that resistance? Do you let it beat you down? Do you get discouraged from it? For me, I think that internally my emotional self says, let's fight this, let's fight the good fight. But then the professional part of me says, well, let's do it, but let's do it in a way that will actually make things happen. So our in-house services included and still include parenting groups, visitation, psychoed. Again, opening up the visitation and the calls is huge. I mean, again, it's like it's an immediate service. It's an immediate thing that you can provide that is tangible and beneficial and something that people is motivating for people. So a couple of these pictures are from a zoo trip that we all took, Pittsburgh Zoo.
Who is we all?
So we were partners, so it was Family Services, Amachi Pittsburgh, and then these were family members, all the, caregivers, children, and then people once they were released too. And it's kind of cool too, because a lot of that money, you know, it's kind of an upstart. Again, if people are like, there are a lot of people, moms and dads, they're not totally secure in being moms or dads.